colleagues, I rise to talk, not really, I'm definitely going to talk on the amendment, but before I get into the meat of this particular amendment, I wanted to tell you some things, how I feel about the bill, and also show y'all some things that I saw when I was watching the testimony in Medical Affairs. And I do that because I am well aware that Senator Davis has worked very hard, 7 years, to get this bill passed. He also has confidently spoken, not only to the newspaper over the weekend, but also to a national medical group last weekend, and stated that he knows that he has 23 votes out of 45 senators. And I have no reason to doubt him. So with that being said, over the weekend I came very close to just withdrawing my amendments because I don't want to waste anybody's time. If he's got the votes, he's got the votes. Then I woke up this morning and I thought, you know what? The one thing I never want to do is leave this state worse than when I found it. And as a mother of 3, I can tell you, I honestly believe that this bill will lead us to trouble, and it will lead the state to where it's going to be worse than when I found it. So, like I said, one of the things that struck me when I was thinking about this morning is that the bill in and of itself is called the Compassionate Care Act. That implies that we are trying to help people with serious medical illnesses, and I do believe that Senator Davis does want to help people with serious medical illnesses. But we need to have an intellectually honest conversation, because to simply say, oh, well, don't worry about things turning from medical to recreational just because South Carolina is so conservative, well, that's just disingenuous, because you have to look at the fact that 37 states have passed medical marijuana, 18 of which have already gone to recreational. Now, you can't just say, well, our General Assembly of the future is going to listen to their constituents. You know why you can't say that? Just because we hopefully will still be conservatives in the future? You can't say that because of the fact that once medical marijuana gets in here, they are going to target those of us who do not like the industry. They will pick us off one by one with their money, because they will have already invested lots and lots of money in the state of South Carolina. So if we're going to talk about it, let's do a little bit better than say, well, our state's not going to do it because we're conservative. We know that that's exactly what's going to happen. One of the things, and how we do know a lot of this, is that we have the data from the other states. History repeats itself. So I'm going to read to you a few points that I believe that you can just go ahead and chalk up to South Carolina going along with. And I recognize that I may not be able to change the minds of the numbers that would need to come out of the 23 and go along with the no votes. I doubt that's going to happen. But I do hope that y'all will at least take seriously a lot of these amendments. I don't even think we can amend this 56-page bill into being something palatable, but there are certainly some things that we do need to amend to make it palatable. But let's go ahead and look at what we can expect from the other states, and I have been studying this for weeks and weeks now, and I have the data. If anybody wants to, I've got a big, thick notebook up here, and you all can come and ask me where I got this information. But what we are going to see is an increased access, dependence, and suicides by youth. That we can count on. We know we also can count on accidental overdoses by children who have gotten a hold of their parents, or in Lexington County, their teachers' medical marijuana. You senators from Lexington, Senator Shealy, and of course Senator Setzler, I know that y'all read with interest when a school teacher in Lexington County mistakenly put her medical marijuana gummy bears in a children's box of candy. So when the 2 children went up and they picked those gummy bears, the teacher realized, oh my gosh, you can't have that one. She took it back. But the other child had also picked those gummy bears, walked out, went to afternoon care, asked for help opening the package, and thank gosh, an aftercare worker realized that that teacher just about gave access to medical marijuana to a child from the classroom candy box. So you're going to see an increase in those kind of instances as well. And let's also talk about veterans. We already talked about the fact that we know we're going to have increased access, dependence, and suicides by youth. You're also going to have this by the veterans. And a lot of what I've heard about in favor of let's pass this bill, it's going to help our veterans, is that, you know, veteran suicide rates is so high, they've got PTSD, they need help, I get that. I love our veterans. Who doesn't love our veterans? But if you look at the states surrounding us, you look at North Carolina, you look at Georgia, their veteran suicide rates are below the national average. But if you look at states such as Colorado, Oregon, and Arizona, where they have passed recreational marijuana, you will see that the incidences of suicides far, far outweighs anything than in the states that don't have it. In particular, Colorado's veteran suicide rate in comparison to ours, ours is 38.4% for age group 18 to 34. Colorado's is 71.1, Arizona 86.4, and Oregon 88%. And that tracks not just with the age group that's younger, it tracks with the older age groups as well. So again, the only state that we know of in the southeastern seaboard that has an out of line or out of whack veteran suicide rate is Florida, and they pass medical marijuana. So let's don't argue anymore. And this data comes from the VA. This data is as of 2021. So let's don't try to say that if we pass this, it's going to help our veterans stay alive. We will see no decrease in the use of opioids or opioid synthetics, because what the trials and studies have shown is that these folks will then use medical marijuana in addition to the opiates that they're already taking. They will then add that to their regimen, making them at increased risk of morbidity. That's what we know is going to happen from the other states. In addition, the list of ailments that will soon qualify if we pass this will go up exponentially. That's where they're going to come first. And if you look at this bill, and I have to agree with Senator Hembry from yesterday, this bill stacks a board that would be allowed to then add what type of ailments would qualify. The board would include medical card holders, parents of medical card holders, physicians predisposed to want to increase those type of card ailments. That's what will happen first. That's in the playbook. Then we go next to the playbook, and then you're going to see, even if our state's General Assembly does not want to take up passing recreational marijuana, you will see big marijuana fund a huge effort to have it put on a referendum. That's what they'll do. Look at Ohio. Ohio just passed medical marijuana 4 years ago. Already they've got enough signatures in their state they can force the General Assembly to debate. And they've said clearly that even if the General Assembly denies going to recreational marijuana, they're still going to get enough signatures to put it on a referendum. That's in the playbook. That's what's going to happen in South Carolina. So again, what we've already talked about is that the unprecedented rise in qualifications of citizens for these medical marijuana cards has been the ages of 18 to 30, claiming chronic pain, and this should be the healthiest demographic that we have. So Senator Davis and I talked a little bit about this, and I don't know if you realize, but I will tell you that I told Senator Davis when he was kindly entertaining me and entertaining now some of my amendments, but when he was trying to get me to be number 24, he wanted to know what it would take, and I indicated that we needed to only have objective, serious medical illnesses, not medical illnesses that cannot specifically be diagnosed. So if I go into a doctor and I say, doctor, I'm hurting, I'm in pain, that cannot be, that's not an objective diagnosis, that's a subjective diagnosis. And you know, I wouldn't even mind with PTSD, even though that also is an objective diagnosis, for us to put an amendment in there that say combat veterans. That's the one category that if they feel like marijuana would help them with PTSD, if they can prove that they're actually combat veterans, then I think that they ought to have access if that's what they want. But he wouldn't do that. He thought about it, and I think he honestly tried to accommodate me, but the marijuana lobby does not want that. They do not want to have us only have true identifiable medical illnesses. Also, and now they've changed it to where they're even adding, this even worse than when I saw it the first time, fibromyalgia, things of that nature. Again, those are diagnoses that just cannot be objectively identified. So I also said that rather than vaping, I would appreciate that if we're going to have this medicine, supposedly, in a form that can be inhaled, that it be in the form of an inhaler, like asthma. That is something to me that at least does indicate that it is medicine, and it is not what all the kids are doing these days, which is vaping medical marijuana or any kind of substance. And they'll be doing it in the bathrooms and at schools. And also, I didn't even write this on my list, but I can tell you now that what's going to happen is once we classify this as medicine, it is going to happen like it has in other states. There are going to be challenges in accordance with the ADA because employers, except in circumstances, prisoners, inmates, and students who have medical marijuana prescriptions will have to be accommodated, and that is going to add exponentially to our state's burden, making our nurses and our prison wardens and everyone else have to worry about, okay, and who's going to pay for it, by the way? Who's going to pay for the medical marijuana? This is all going to follow when somebody files an ADA complaint, and that'll be coming as well. Now, if I could ask staff to please play for me clips 1, 2, and 3 of Ms. Debbie Moak's testimony with the Arizona Governor's Office. So while the screens are coming down, Senator Davis and I ended up agreeing on the 94.2% that now is the chronic pain level in Arizona. What we couldn't agree on, and I'll have to go ahead and admit, hold just 1 second, that Colorado stopped keeping the data in the same form in which they had previously. So I could not see the exact number of those in the 18 to 34 category. So I can't say for sure that they're the overwhelming majority, but I can say the overwhelming majority of cardholders is now increased since this testimony was taken. And for you new senators, you need to know that this bill did not go through the traditional process. No testimony was taken. So again, I knew that I had in my head that the overwhelming majority of the cardholders between in the younger subset was for chronic pain. If I could get you to play Ms. Moak's testimony.
Get into who the typical qualifying patient is in Arizona. We currently have 119,124 qualified patients. The majority of those patients are between the ages of 18 and 40. That's the largest category. They are largely male, and the 82% of them receive a prescription because of chronic pain. I'm 60 years old as of this past month, and I know about chronic pain. I don't remember chronic pain at 18. I will also share with you.
And so that you know, this lady, again, was with the Arizona Governor's Office. So the governor opposed a switch to recreational. He lost, even though she was going to states trying to say don't do this, but he lost. It's now recreational. Go ahead, please, loudly.
Here across the nation, people talking about things certainly I care about and have had in my own family and friends: cancer, glaucoma, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's. Let me share with you the numbers of qualifying patients in Arizona that are actually using medicine, marijuana, for those reasons. Cancer, 2.57. 2.5%. Glaucoma, 0.63%, less than 1%. Multiple sclerosis, 0. Alzheimer's, 0.07. Again, chronic pain, over 82%. Seizures, 0.69%. Is this a system about medicine?
And the next one, please. You. So, and doing the math real quick, and some of the people have walked in later, but I think you said out of all of the card carriers, the conditions that they have range from serious to, I would say, chronic pain. But I think you said cancer, 2.5%, or who are getting these prescriptions, glaucoma, 0.63, MS, 0, Alzheimer's, 0.07, chronic pain, 82%, and seizures, 0.69%. Did I get that right?
That is correct.
So, other than chronic pain, it looks to me like really only 3.96% of the card-carrying people with prescriptions in your state have what we would consider, I guess, to be serious medical conditions other than the chronic pain. Is that right?
Yes, Senator.
And how do y'all factor in PTSD in your state?
PTSD was just recently approved. I have the date here somewhere. So it's still just currently being implemented, but was in fact very recently approved by the VA.
What would you recommend then, if some of my colleagues are intent upon going down this road, what would you recommend as a way for us to, I guess, fix what can be prescribed so that it is actual something, that is truly serious in nature, and that we can more restrict and see some better outcomes for serious conditions?
Sadly, Senator, I wish I could report to you that I've seen a system that's reliable, ethical, has not caused great public safety and public harm, and I have not. So I am not the person to answer that question.
So before we move on to any other clips, I'd like to take a moment to also mention that in Arizona, there was an attorney general who was definitely opposed to legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes. And in fact, his name is Mark Bronovich, and he was widely quoted as saying, in Arizona, we legalized medical marijuana for medical purposes. The results of that, apparently, that there are a bunch of 18 and 25-year-old males with back problems and migraine headaches, because that's who's getting the cards, most of them. So we know what's going to happen there and here. In addition, the things that we know that we can expect to happen is that we are going to see a vast jump in fatal car accidents with marijuana in their systems. As you know, it's going to be very difficult for us to prove whether the marijuana was active at that point in time such that it could have contributed, and the only way to do that would be to provide funding for law enforcement and hospitals to take mandatory blood draws. That's what we will have to do in order to prove that if one of our loved ones gets hit by a driver who seems to be impaired, that's the only way, as lawyers or as prosecutors, you'll be able to prove it. In addition, we will have a difficult time tracking marijuana prescriptions. If it's going to take a lot of software. Otherwise, people will be able to jump from pharmacy to pharmacy, or whatever we're going to call these things. Quite frankly, I don't think it makes any difference if you call something a therapeutic whatever. It's still a pot dispensary. And so we need to be able to track and make sure that somebody's not going from one county to the next, picking up whatever they can, and that's going to be some expensive software. I would like to point out something I found interesting. I did not know until actually just this weekend that Colorado has actually gone back and decided that they had prescribed too much medical marijuana. At one point, you could get 40 grams, and now they have reduced it to 8 grams. And I was curious about that. I'm like, this is a recreational medical marijuana state. Why would they decrease what the amount you can get per day by 32 grams? And you know how they did it? because those under 21 are not considered adult. So they had a problem with the 18 to 21-year-olds still having to rely on medical marijuana cards and then getting prescribed up to what they would consider an adult daily usage. So that's why they went in there. They decreased it downward, and even that amount, 8 grams, is below what the FDA has recommended for clinical trials, like those in the right to try category that we have already passed. Nobody wants to mention, the media never seems to mention it, that we have already passed the right to try, and there are a lot of clinical trials where people can participate and get marijuana if they feel like that it's going to help them, and they get the certification from a doctor that they are either within a year of death or that they have an ailment that which will indeed place their morbidity at issue. So you don't, it's not even within a year of life. They basically have to prove that they have a condition that if they don't get it reversed by some form of medicine, that it will end up killing them. So nobody mentions that. Nobody mentions Epidiolex, the new pill that the FDA has now approved with THC in it. Nobody mentions that that's available either. FDA approved. You can get a real doctor to prescribe it, not one that just goes along with the flow to maybe increases medical practice some, but you can also then go get it from a very real pharmacist, not one that's called therapeutic or whatever. It's a real pharmacist. Nobody likes to talk about that, but that is exactly what has happened. But so that you'll know, the FDA put out a recommendation of no more than 5 milligrams for those therapeutic trials, the clinical trials. And I see no reason in the world why we wouldn't do the same at the very least, to say no more than 5 milligrams per day, and we need a tracking system for it. Excuse me. So again, we can also expect that the majority of cards will be granted by a small percentage of doctors. Let's see, I think we may have to play clips 4 and clip 6 now, please. Go ahead and play clips 4, 5, and 6.
One follow-up made me think about, is every doctor allowed to prescribe in Arizona?
Our prescribing doctors, and I know Sally has the exact numbers, are chiropractors and naturopaths.
Follow-up on that, Ms. Senator, is that of the naturopaths that prescribe, 25 of those doctors have prescribed 62% of all of the recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if y'all didn't hear that, 25 doctors prescribed 62% of the card recommendations in Colorado. Oh, no, Arizona.
Quick last question. How do you determine, because there's been a lot of talk about
Can I
dosage.
run through
how do
this
you determine
stuff, or do you need
whether
to hear it
someone
again?
Smokes 5,
Senator
for lack of a better
Charles.
term, joints a day, or
Osteopaths, I think she
Osteopath.
said.
joints a day, or
Or
take
homie, I don't know. We can play
a
that
bottle
again.
of
Can I
cabin
get you to
oil?
play the
How
clip
do you
again?
determine what dose?
I go to sleep, sir, because
One follow-up made me think about,
Yeah, can we get the volume?
is every doctor
Can we
allowed
increase
to
the-
prescribe in Arizona?
Our prescribing doctors, and I know Sally has the exact numbers, are chiropractors and naturopaths.
Follow-up on that, Ms. Senator, is that of the naturopaths that prescribe, 25 of those doctors have prescribed 62% of all of the recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So did that answer your question? So,
Senator from Charleston, what purpose you rise?
I heard him say natural
path.
paths. I
Natural.
don't know what that is. Do you know what? I'll
I
have
guess
to
they're,
Google that, I guess. You don't know what that is, a natural path.
I've never visited a natural path. No. Have visited lots of chiropractors, though.
Okay.
So, and if we could go
Senator from
ahead
Charleston.
and play clips 5 and 6 while we're at it, so I don't have to keep going back to the video
Quick last
screen.
question. How do you determine, because there's been a lot of talk about dosage, how do you determine whether someone smokes 5, for lack of a better term, joints a day, or 50 joints a day, or take a bottle of cabin oil? How do you determine what dose?
I go to sleep, sir, because I have no fear that this medicine is going to kill them. This medicine, there's no overdose from this. And I give them 3 rules. Hydrate before you medicate, start out low or very low and slow with food, and journal. Because I don't know what they're getting. Because that's another whole conversation that we need to know. But right now, that's how I'd start out. But we do need laboratory testing. We do need standardization. And we need more doctors like me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to ask.
So that was Representative Eddie Talon, and I hope you were able to hear the doctor. Her best recommendation was hydrate, go slow and start low, and journal. That's the best this doctor can do, and yet we're now trying to give over what these patients should take to a pharmacist. Okay, is that the last clip right there? 6? Okay. Oh, and so while we're at it, this is the photo. These are some photos of some edibles. These are edible candies, cookies, those kind of things that you can see in other states. There are many, many of them. I don't even know how they get away with a lot of it, because some of it is like, it looks just like Oreo packaging, just like Fritos, everything else. And now this is in recreational states, I want to be clear, but I do believe we'll end up there. You can get marijuana products out of vending machines and even in your hotel refrigerator. Again, there are a lot more like that. Now, what has happened in most medical marijuana states, what they do is demand that you put a pot leaf on the cover of something, but still they have it in all kinds of forms. Cookies, brownies, gummies. We don't know what they're getting, but we do know that kids are going to get it, and they are going to have accidents, and you're going to see, just like they have in other states, an increased number of hospitalizations of children who have ingested what looks like candies and cookies, and it's just really a byproduct of neglect, I think, not only of the parents, but of the states that have allowed such. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is that I'm a mother of 3. I have a 17-year-old little boy, and I can tell you that I'm frightened for him. You know, we've all been through high school, and we all know that there's a tipping point somewhere. All the kids are friends, and we all knew each other since 1st grade. Maybe if we'd been in that school for a long time, we all got along. Senator Setzler, I went to Saluda River Elementary, then to Northside, right on up through BC. And I can tell you that there's a tipping point, usually somewhere in high school, where your children, just like we did, decided that they're going to go different paths. Some are going to choose the path of drugs, and some are not. We used to call them, you know, heads or stoners, and then whatever the name was for the athletic ones or the ones who didn't go that path. But why in the world would we make it easier for our kids to choose the bad path and then put something in front of them like candy-looking stuff that that'll be very easy for them to get a hold of? I'm very worried that this bill is not designed solely to help sick people. I think that Senator Davis has it in his heart that that he wants to help sick people. But if we're going to be intellectually honest with each other, we have to realize that our state, once we've opened that door, big money comes in, and our state is forever changed. So I guess I need to tell you something, and then I'm going to sit down. I do need to get to my amendment, but I do want to tell you something that happened to me over the weekend. Well, actually, it started back in 2019. In 2019, I got approached by a man who basically said that he was a veteran, he had PTSD, he keeps a gun on the beside of his car because if law enforcement ever pulls him over, he feels like he's going to have to kill him. He started just saying all kinds of crazy things, right? Well, next thing I know, he supposedly lives in Greenville. He shows up at my law office without an appointment, wanting to talk to me. Trying to keep the situation calm and okay, I met with the guy and I did talk to him, and I tried to have polite conversations. He says I did have polite conversations. He understands my concern for my family and other families in the state if this were to pass. But he said that if I don't pass it, that he will target me in the next election. And he said if I do give him the vote, that he could guarantee that I would get $100,000 in exchange for my vote. I turned all this over to SLED at the time. He says, like I said, he was a Marine. We can't find records we need indicating that he had been in and out of mental health hospitals, because that's what he says. That would include the VA. But in any event, I gave the man an audience. He began getting really ridiculous, showing up at some of my pizza politics events, stirring up the crowd, having other veterans planted in the crowd, talking about how they needed to have medical marijuana or they were just gonna, they were not gonna make it. And so I ended up, after turning this over to SLED, was recommended that I just needed to stop all discourse. Blocked him from every channel that I could. Well, this week, he now has signed up for my newsletter under a different email address. He proceeds to tell me that I'm a liar. He flies off on me, that I'm lying about medical marijuana. And then he, the very next day, gets to one of my law partners using an email address, not mine, but another one associated with the law firm, to tell me how very sorry he is. He doesn't mean that. That's just one incident. I had a lobbyist in here last week. Somebody let a lobbyist in who has a daughter in a wheelchair into the cloakroom. I had already told that lobbyist that I'd given her, she's also my constituent, I had given her audiences on this bill before, and we were going to be at loggerheads. We were not ever going to agree. She tried to get an appointment with me multiple times this week or last week, and I did not. I declined. She ends up coming out of the cloakroom unescorted. I'm sitting in one of those chairs, and she blocks my chair with her daughter's wheelchair and proceeds to, try to make introductions and talk. And I just said hello to the daughter and told her in no uncertain terms I was not going to talk. These people held true. She did the same thing. She has gone on social media many times to bash me. So has that veteran that went to these other veterans and said, hey, you need to not vote her in and this kind of stuff. And I want to tell you specifically now what that veteran wrote. What he wrote was, regarding our meeting, I have a hard time understanding Southern. As you know, since I've recovered from PTSD, I've lost my ability for social nuance. I am very direct, factual, and honest. When I said to you, if you don't agree with us, then we will just run one against you, you claimed it was a threat. I know it is politics. You don't like the president, senator, you run somebody else. Number one, a Republican candidate will run against you in the primary. And that's, this last primary. Veterans will endorse the candidate. You will lose the election unless your law enforcement bubbas come up with a PAC to support you. But of course, they don't have a lot of money to fund it legally. These are the kind of people that we're talking about here. The young lady in the wheelchair, her mother has even admitted that she does not like coming up to the State House. Then why do that? What is the purpose of that? I'm just disheartened by everything that I've seen. And I'm going to tell you one last little thing that happened this weekend. That same lobbyist gave out my information to somebody that was spouting off on this anti, or pro-medical marijuana website and claimed to know my deceased mother-in-law and father-in-law. He wrote 2 separate emails, and she said, you should send them. Sure enough, I do get these emails, and I didn't know until later that she's the one who said you ought to send them. And sure enough, I get 2 emails, one at my law firm, one at my Senate office, and it says, it's got my mother-in-law's name in bold. She would have approved of medical marijuana. She was suffering, she died, and she did die of ovarian cancer. But medical marijuana was nowhere near the conversation back when she passed away, which was a long time ago. And then I get another one with my father-in-law's name. Rudy would have liked to have had medical marijuana too. Well, really? I mean, he died peacefully in his sleep, never asking for medical marijuana. The whole thing was ridiculous. People stooping to those kind of levels, and that's exactly what we're going to get and more of it when we end up opening our state up. My only hope, now I cannot be as eloquent as Senator Johnson, but my only hope is that when we start going through these amendments, that the 23 of you who are committed to the idea of medical marijuana, may I get some order?
Senate, come to order.
Also, my only, like I said, I would not be as eloquent as Senator Johnson, no doubt, but my only hope is when we start going through the amendments, the 23 of you who are supportive of this bill will pay close attention and not simply go along with whatever Senator Davis wants on these amendments. Like I said, he has already agreed to, I think, 4 or 5 of my amendments, and he will not agree to some, I feel sure. But I think everyone's amendment deserves fair opportunities to be heard so that we can at least try to shore this bill up a little bit better. Also, I've heard a lot that we need to listen to our constituents in the polls, and if those 23 of you, if that's what you're doing, you want to listen to the constituents, I want to tell you that most of those polls don't just ask one question: do you want medical marijuana? One of the polls that I think got a lot of this rolling was a Winthrop poll, and that was in, I believe it was 2017. And in that poll, it said, do you feel that medical marijuana should or should not be legalized for medical purposes? And we end up getting a poll strongly in favor of it being administered for medical purposes. But then the second question for that was, if medical marijuana were legalized for medical purposes, do you think it should or should not be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration like current medications? So in short, 78% supported legalized medical marijuana for medical purposes, but 77% said it should be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. That is often left out in various news accounts that the media is putting out there. So what I'm telling you is that I think that we all have a duty. If the media is not going to do it, we all have a duty to put out the truth and let our constituents know that there is a right to try out there. There is at least one medical pill FDA approved, and the worries that I've now mentioned, because history does repeat itself. So in closing, I will say that we don't know what's going to happen to this bill. I'm going to assume that it gets out of the Senate and that Senator Davis is correct, that he's got the necessary votes. And we don't know what's going to happen over in the House. We don't know. We'll see. But I can tell you this. Our governor is going to have a heck of a time if it hits his desk in the same form that it's in right now. In the words of Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado, he said, unfortunately, you don't get to pick your legacy. And I hope that our governor's legacy will not be that he let this bill get passed as it is with so many loopholes, and he becomes the governor that allowed big marijuana in our state. I hope it does not happen.
Senator from Greenville, Senator Loftus, what purpose do you rise?
Question.
Yes,
Senator
sir.
yields for question. Senator yields.